Magic the Gathering in space. But no, it's not Unfinity. This video is about the other Magic the Gathering in space set soon to hit the shelves. Warhammer 40,000 Commander Precons. There are 4 of these precons, and if you've spent time looking at the deck lists, you've probably noticed that these aren't like your typical Commander precon, and not just in flavor either. The Warhammer 40k decks are more complete decks than any Commander precon we've seen before. Warhammer 40k was a collaboration between Wizards of the Coast and Games Workshop to bring the world of Warhammer to the game mechanics of Magic the Gathering, and let me tell you, they did not take that task lightly. There are around 160 brand new original designs in these decks, brand new cards to Magic the Gathering, and they average about 40 of them per deck. Many of these new cards are very, very, very extremely good and will see play not just in the context of these precons, but all across the Commander format, which is great. Sort of. We'll get to that. You see, if even only a handful of these brand new original designs end up being must-haves for Commander, then they're going to need a reprint. They're not even on shelves yet, and they need a reprint because, well, if they never get reprinted, the price is going to skyrocket. The problem is these are Warhammer-themed, designed, named, and flavored cards, so they're going to need a Magic the Gathering reprint, which they can do, but it's tough to do and slow to do. So what exactly are we in store for? Potential high prices, that's what. That's nothing new at this point. Anyway, I've got more to say about that, but what cards do I think from Warhammer 40k are most likely to need these reprints? Presented here are my top picks for Commander in the 99 from the Warhammer 40k decks. But first, a quick word about this video. This video is brought to you by Whatnot. Whatnot is a live stream auction app where you can buy and sell collectibles. They hold auctions on all sorts of collectibles. Pokemon and Flesh and Blood cards, Funko Pops, vintage video games and toys. And even sneakers. That's right, sneakers. Oh yeah, and there's also this thing, it's called like Magic the Gathering. I played that in high school. Do people still play that? I played it. Sellers host live streams and people bid back and forth for items in real time. There are live streams going on 24/7, whether you're looking for the correct Star Trek figurine from your childhood while avoiding getting back to work, or when you can't sleep at 3 a.m. and just got an idea for a new Magic the Gathering deck. And speaking of live streams, I'll be hosting a stream Saturday, October 1st at 3 p.m. Pacific on Whatnot, doing a live AMA. AMA stands for Ask Me All, or just anything that you want. Find me at my Whatnot account. If you want to join me, all you need to do is download the app and then bookmark my show to join the live stream, and then ask me what you want to know. How did I get so stylish? Why am I obsessed with merfolk? And of course, who are you and what are you doing here? And if you sign up using the link in this description, you'll get $15 free to use on the Whatnot app to buy anything you like. It's $15. Magic cards cost less than $15, right? Maybe not the cards that we're going to talk about in this video, maybe now, I don't know, but it's a place where you can hang out with like-minded collectors and find great deals. Many auctions start at just $1. So come join me on October 1st at 3 p.m. Pacific for the AMA live stream on my Whatnot account, and thank you to Whatnot for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's jump into my top 7 picks for Warhammer cards that are going to make a splash in Commander. Remember, we are looking at cards that go in the 99, and number 7 is Lord of Change. This is first on the list because it's a juicy option for any blue deck that either cheats creatures into play from your hand or graveyard, or likes to abuse enter the battlefield effects. Lord of Change is a 7-mana 6/6 demon creature with flying and ward 3. When Lord of Change enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards. Ancestral Recall is that you. Now, Lord of Change isn't the absolute best creature with an enters the battlefield effect in Commander. That title likely belongs to Archon of Cruelty, but stapling one of the top 3 strongest cards of all time to a mana cost appropriate body sure does make for an appealing creature in a format where you really want your expensive creatures to have an impact the moment they hit the field. Imagine pairing Lord of Change with Ephemerate, or Eldrazi Displacer, or Marchesa the Black Rose, and any sacrifice outlet. If you thought drawing 3 cards was good, imagine if it were 6, or 9, or even more. This is absolutely a card whose price will skyrocket skyrocket if it doesn't get frequent reprints in future Commander products. As is number 6 on our list, Vexil's Praetor. In the market for a sturdy blocker in white that protects your commander at instant speed? Well, Vexil's Praetor is exactly that. For 3 generic and 1 white mana, you get a 3/4 Custodes warrior creature with Vigilance. What is a Custodes, you ask? I haven't the foggiest idea. But as long as you control the Custodes warrior, your commander is Progenitus. Protection from everything. It cannot be targeted, it cannot be blocked, or even damaged by any spell or permanent. This card is good in and of itself, but it's especially good if one of the main uses for your commander is attacking. Admittedly, Vexil's Praetor is a bit awkward in Voltron strategies, since protection from everything means you can't enchant or even equip your commander as long as this is in play. Still, the effect is quite strong, and the card having flash means you can blow out a removal spell if you have the open mana. Coming in at number 5 is Sanguinary Priest. You know, Mayhem Devil and Judith the Scourge Diva are staples of aristocrat strategies in Commander due to their unique and flexible effects. They can provide reach damage, pinging opponents' life points as you sacrifice creatures for damage. They can keep the board clear of any creature with a low toughness, and keep planeswalkers in check thanks to the any target clause of their ability. The biggest issue with these 2 cards is their color restrictions. You can only play them in decks that contain Rakdos colors. Enter Sanguinary Priest. For 3 generic and 1 black mana, Sanguinary Priest provides a 2/4 body with a similar triggered ability to Judith and Mayhem Devil. Crucially, Sanguinary Priest is a mono-black card, meaning all black-based sacrifice decks can now have access to the kind of effect that Judith and Mayhem Devil offer. Yes, black sack decks had numerous Blood Artist effects, but these cards only hit life totals, not on-board permanents. But that's not the only thing that makes Sanguinary Priest an appealing choice over the 2 Rakdos cards. Sanguinary Priest's toughness is 4, making it sturdier, able to survive more damage-based removal, and successfully act as a blocker against many creatures in combat. There's also no non-token clause in its ability, meaning you can freely sacrifice token creatures and still get Sanguinary Priest's ability. What's more, Sanguinary Priest is a cleric, an important creature type in black. Sanguinary Priest is therefore a slam-dunk inclusion in an Aura Skyclave Hierophant deck. The best part of Sanguinary Priest, though, is the ability at the top of its text box, Lifelink. That means the damage Priest is dealing when your creatures die will also be gaining you life. A mini lightning helix every time you lose a creature? Now this is commandering. It said pod racing originally in the script. I do get through cultural osmosis, that's a Star Wars reference, but I'm changing it on the spot. Now this is commander. It's Commanderin time. That's another thing I got from cultural. It's Profin time. All right, moving on. Speaking of creatures dying, the next card is a one-sided Super Wheel of Fortune. If a bunch of creatures have died this turn, that is. Blood for the Blood God. It's an instant for 8 generic, 2 black, and 1 red mana. The cost of Blood for the Blood God is reduced by 1 generic mana for each creature that's died this turn. When this card resolves, you discard your whole hand and draw 8 new cards, then deal 8 damage to each opponent. You then exile Blood for the Blood God. Notably, Blood for the Blood God is an instant, so you can cast this on your opponent's turn after they've wrathed the board. The card is also a useful tool for refueling in an aristocrat strategy or a Grixis-controlled deck that packs some board wipes of its own. Imagine a turn where you have just 2 cards in hand and the battlefield is packed with at least 13 creatures. You cast Blasphemous Act, wiping the board clean. Then you cast Blood for the Blood God and discard your empty hand in exchange for a fresh grip of cards and a hefty smack to your opponent's faces. And all for just 4 mana. Next up is a creature that doesn't do a whole lot when cast from your hand. If it enters from the graveyard, however, the card simply is obscene. Canoptek Tomb Sentinel is a 4 mana, 4/3 colorless insect artifact creature with vigilance. If it enters the battlefield from the graveyard, exile target non-land permanent. The card also has an unearth for 7 generic mana, but trust me, that's not the best way to make use of this Sentinel's potent ability. Actually, you don't have to trust me, I'll show you. Imagine this Tomb Sentinel in, let's say, a Marin of Clan Neltoth deck. If you have 4 experience counters, you can return this card to the battlefield every single turn. In a Carador Ghost Chieftain deck, you can cast this card from the graveyard every turn. In a Marchesa, the Black Rose deck, you can dethrone someone with this card, then sacrifice it to exile another non-land permanent on every end step. Since the Sentinel is an artifact, it's perfect for your Duretti Scrap Savant deck, your Emry Lurker of the Lock deck, your Silas Wren deck, heck, even your Muldrotha the Gravetide deck. Honestly, you can play this card card in any deck that can easily put it into play from the graveyard. It's colorless. Canoptech Tomb Sentinel is a sweet, powerful tool for graveyard recursion strategies, and honestly, it easily could be considered the #1 spot on this list. But I got 2 more doozies for you. What are they? Well, let me ask you a question. What beats out the Tomb Sentinel for the top 2 cards from Warhammer 40k? Number 2 is a card that's a bit of a Splinter Twin situation. Out of the Tombs is an enchantment for 2 generic and 1 black mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Aeon counters on Out of the Tombs. Then mill cards equal to the number of Aeon counters on it. If you would draw a card when your library has no cards in it, instead you return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. But if you can't, you lose the game. Don't be put off by the prospect of losing the game, though. This is a powerful card for any deck that relies on self-milling in order to fuel its own game plan. If one of the creatures in your graveyard is a Platinum Angel, then you have a surefire way to keep from ever losing the game regardless of how many creatures are in your graveyard. If the Angel dies to anything other than exile-based removal, it'll simply be returned to the battlefield on your next draw step. This card does, of course, put you at serious risk of having your graveyard exiled once your library is empty, which would certainly lose you the game on the spot, as would any form of enchantment removal when your library is empty, since it would leave you to deck yourself. Honestly, the text on this card could have stopped at the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Aeon counters on it, and it would still be number 2 on this list. That's because, in typical Commander Precon fashion, this card's existence breaks a card that's more than a decade old. Mogosi, the Water Veil, is a land from the original Zendikar that taps for blue mana and allows you to take an extra turn at the steep cost of skipping your next turn. But if you could find a way to put an Aeon counter on Mogosi without having to skip a turn, aha! Enter Nesting Ground, a card from the Ikoria Commander Precons. If you have Nesting Ground and Mogosi in play along with Out of the Tombs, then you have a very simple recipe for infinite turns. On your upkeep, Out of the Tombs gets 2 Eon counters. Activate Nesting Ground to move an Eon counter from your enchantment to Mogosi. Then activate Mogosi's ability, removing the Eon counter and returning Mogosi to your hand. You'll take an extra turn after this one. Since Mogosi enters the battlefield tapped, make sure you play it again for the turn, put 2 more Aeon counters on Out of the Tombs, and repeat the process all over again. Finally, a way to take infinite turns in Commander. Was there ever another way? Oh wait. And now for the #1 best card from Warhammer 40k for Inside the 99. Scepter of Eternal Glory. This card is a 4-mana legendary artifact that reads, tap, add 1 mana of any color. It also says, tap, add 3 mana of any 1 color. Activate this ability only if you control at least 3 lands with the same name. An artifact that taps for 3 lands of any 1 color? Why, that's just Black Lotus, I am told. Well, you've had to spend mana to cast it, and you don't have to sacrifice in order to use it, so it's more like Gilded Lotus, a commander staple that costs a whole mana more than Scepter of Eternal Glory. Scepter isn't just a strictly cheaper version of Gilded Lotus, though. There's a deck building cost that comes with it, too. You have to expect to have 3 lands of the same name in play in order to make this card more than an expensive mana rock, which, given the rules of Commander, means you have to have 3 basic lands in play, barring some shenanigans with Vesuva and Thespian Stage. This is therefore most likely to see play in monocolor decks or in dual color decks with a lot of basic lands. But in those decks, this card is excellent. Knocking a mana off the cost of Gilded Lotus is huge. You'll be able to get your Scepter out earlier, which means casting your big spell, or your flurry of cheaper spells, a turn sooner, which can often make the difference between resolving said spell and having the spell countered or otherwise answered by your opponents. As an artifact, the card is a perfect fit for any deck with artifact synergies, serving as either a replacement to Gilded Lotus or simply more redundancy to the powerful artifact ramp spell. Scepter is an instant staple and should be included in any monocolor deck, provided you can get your hands on one for a reasonable price. If that price does not stay reasonable, as I fear, then this card is going to need a reprint, perhaps more than one. Now, these are just 7 of the best cards from Warhammer 40k, but the truth is, these precons are absolutely packed with cards that will be staples in Commander. The quality of these precons is very high, not just in terms of brand new card designs, but also in the reprints included. Darkness, Caged Sun, Chromantic Lantern, Herald's Horn, the list goes on. It's clear that a lot of thought and effort was poured into these precons. I imagine that both Wizards of the Coast and Games Workshop are going to consider this collaboration an enormous success. But the high quality of these precons actually is a little alarming for Magic the Gathering players. Since these cards are so good, and because a lot of their flavor is so specific to Warhammer, it seems unlikely that we'll see a reprint for most of these sweet new Commander cards for a long time. If ever, at least not in this form. This might be the only collaborative joint venture between the two companies. So that means that they would have to issue limited cards with Magic skins, which is a slow process that could never encompass all the original designs in these decks. What does that mean for players? Soaring prices for any cards that see significant Commander play. And anyone who misses the boat on this set in the coming months will be priced out of playing with them down the line. If the idea that there's this group of cards that can't be reprinted and became prohibitively expensive sounds familiar, that's because it's exactly what the reserved list is. You know, the promise made by Wizards of the Coast that some of the most iconic cards in Magic history will remain out of reach for the average Magic player forever, so that collectors who bought these cards 20 years ago don't lose their absurdly high value? Or in simpler terms, the thing that's killing Legacy. As Wizards of the Coast continues to explore crossover IP with their Universes Beyond sets, this is a problem that will only get worse and worse, and it's not exactly clear what is to be done about it. Perhaps Wizards of the Coast will release a product in a few years that's Universes Beyond Masters, with the greatest hits from their various Universes Beyond products. But whatever the future holds for crossover IP and Magic, one thing is certain. If there's a card in Warhammer 40k that's caught your eye, buy it now before the prices rise. Thanks once again to Whatnot for sponsoring this video. Remember, if you sign up using the link in this video's description, you'll get $15 free to use on the Whatnot app to buy anything you like. It's a place where you can hang out with like-minded collectors and find great deals on Magic the Gathering or collectible toys. Many auctions start at just $1, and you can come join me on October 1st at 3 p.m. Pacific for the AMA live stream on my Whatnot account, Tolarian College. Thank you, Whatnot, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Happy Toe Claws. Princess, the professor's favorite Magic the Gathering deck, to battle each other with two top 8 Pro Tour Dark Ascension decks that you have selected.
This could be great in Commander. Who's gonna tell her?
I'm going to flashback Unburial Rites, and I'm gonna target Elish Norn Grand Cenobite.
Tap 2 and play Whip Flare.
Where'd all your creatures go, Tappy?
They're alive in my heart still.
These are my original 4 worm coils, and I even have actual ones from 10 years ago, and these are my actual worm coils.
And
she's gonna flip it right away.
And it flips, gonna vapor snag your bird back in your hand.
The way you shuffle is so hard on those cards. I'm sorry.